Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is fan fiction. So, Natural Reality, Arc 1, Chapter 2. Now this chapter is kind of short, so I might actually do Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 together. But yeah, Chapter 2. Yugi awoke to Yami sleeping on top of him. Heavy white bandages encased his forearms up to his elbows. He tried to wriggle out, but found quite quickly that Yami had other ideas. The dark spirit curled his arm tightly around his waist. His left hand followed the contours of Yugi's arm to rest and wrap securely around his right wrist, where it rested over Yugi's head. He smiled and remembered back to the day of the Ceremonial Dual, and the series of events that happened after that. Flashback. Before the door to the spirit realm closed, a gust of wind pulled him through. He felt like he was tumbling downwards until he landed onto something soft and warm. I guess Malik forgot to mention this bit. The deep voice that emanated from somewhere beneath him said, "You're not hurt, are you, Aibo?" "I'm not," Yugi murmured, sliding off Atemu's back. "Where are we?" He looked around at the cloudy expanse and down at Atemu. "I'm not sure, Aibo." Atemu made a move to stand up, but something pushed him back down. "What?" "Thank you for returning my name to the afterlife." Atemu felt something was being ripped out of his heart. "That was your final task on my behalf. You will now be known by your other name, Yami." Warmth flooded his entire being. "Your journey is not yet done." "What do you mean your journey is not yet done?" Yami asked, sitting up. "And why is Yugi dragged into this?" He could feel the young duelist staring at him. "Yugi?" A bronze-skinned version of Yami appeared before him. He gently cupped Yugi's face. "The reincarnation of my beloved Heba. You know, in your heart, what you desire, and you were pulled through to fulfill that desire." He smiled and pulled away to look at them both. "I will return soon." "Yugi?" Yami said with a sly smile. "What did Atemu mean when he said about your heart's desire?" He watched Yugi's back stiffen. "And about fulfilling that desire?" Well, you see..." Yugi blushed a bright crimson. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Amethyst eyes opened and gazed into ruby eyes. "I love you, Yami. Ever since Duelist Kingdom, and more so with every day." There was a silence growing between the two. Yugi held his gaze with Yami, tears threatening to form the longer the silence went. Yami moved forward to envelop the young duelist in his arms. "And I love you, Yugi," Yami whispered in his ear. "You cannot imagine how happy I am to hear you say that to me." Leaning forward, Yugi gave Yami a small kiss. He jumped when Yami pressed hard against him. It wasn't until Yami knocked him over that he felt the strong gust of wind and a deep disembodied laugh. "Just like Heba and myself." Atemu reappeared and gestured to an open door behind Yami. "If you will follow me." End of flashback. Yugi sighed and poked Yami in the side. His Yami groaned and slid slightly. Getting an idea, Yugi poked him repeatedly until Yami had slid off him completely. He got up and made his way to the kitchen. Pouring himself an orange juice, he sat in the lounge on the couch near the window. The sky was still dark, but an orange glow began to peek through between the buildings in the distance. He was enjoying his quiet moment until a familiar feeling began to creep up on him. Without so much as a blink, he sent his fiery light around the house to raise a shield. "Yami!" Yugi screamed through their link. "Shadow curse!" He put the glass on the windowsill and raised his hands, palms out, to focus his energy into the shield. Yami, who was still asleep at the time of Yugi's scream, rolled off the bed and landed with a shock on the floor. The mauve light from his hikari shield filtered through the skylight of their bedroom. "Aibo," Yami called as he pulled on a pair of pants and raced downstairs. "How many?" "Many!" cried Yugi. His small frame looked slightly larger with his pale amethyst glow illuminating the lounge. "They keep touching my shield. There's more than I can manage on my own." Yami pulled Yugi off the couch and held him tight against his chest. He waited until Yugi was standing stably before extending his right hand so it grasped Yugi's right wrist. Immediately, the shield changed from a mauve to a marble of red and purple. Yami could feel the amount of shadow curse trying to break down the shield. His anger flowed through the link to Yugi. "I don't know if we can last this time," Yugi murmured. He could feel his magic draining fast, even with Yami's assistance. "I'm not yet healed from the other night." "What were you doing down here anyway?" Yami asked, before noticing the glass on the windowsill. "I didn't notice you get up." "You were dead to the world when I got up," Yugi teased. "I was wondering if I was going to need a horn or some sort of explosion to wake you up." "Your voice is all I need," Yami purred in his ear. "Hikari, we need to cleanse the area." Chapter 3. Tia, Joey and Tristan stared at what was once the game shop. Fire crews picked through the rubble, pulling out the debris in their search for survivors. Excuse me?" Tia asked one of the firemen. "What happened here?" "You live here?" "A friend of mine does." She could see him start to give her his full attention. "We usually drop by to pick him up on the way to school." "There was an explosion just past 5 this morning," the fireman said quickly. "It took us a while to put out the electrical fire." He looked at the rubble, then back at Tia. "How many were living here?" "My friend and his partner," Tia replied, trying to contain her emotions. "His grandfather is staying in America with a friend." "We found a body!" Someone deep in the debris yelled. "Correction! 2!" The 3 waited anxiously until the first was extracted from the rubble. Yami looked bad. It was clear he was struggling to breathe. Yugi looked worse. The heavy white bandages were torn, revealing the cuts on his arms that were bleeding freely. But unlike Yami, Yugi appeared lifeless. Only the tiniest movement of his chest told otherwise. "We'll get to the school and let the teachers know," Joey whispered in Tia's ear. His face was pale, but relieved that they were alive. "You know more about Yugi than we do. Help the doctors out and make sure they live." Yugi could only... Tia could only nod in reply. Her eyes fixed on their unconscious bodies. She followed the paramedic into the back of the ambulance with Yugi in it, and quickly relayed all she knew about Yugi's medical history. "Do you know anything about the other young man?" "Other than that he's a 5,000-year-old pharaoh and Yugi's lover?" she asked sarcastically in her head before saying, "No, Yugi knows everything about Yami. I haven't known him as long as I have known Yugi." She shook her head when asked about the other team's family. "Yugi said he has no family." "How are they doing?" Joey asked Tia in the waiting room after school let out. "Yugi is the worst hurt," Tia replied quietly. "They think he protected Yami from the explosion. They were suspicious about the long cuts along his forearm. They said they looked self-inflicted." Tia gave Joey a half smile. "Yami woke up a little while ago. They took him for tests." She chuckled before adding, "He refused to go anywhere without seeing Yugi first." "Has he said what happened?" Tristan asked. "He said he was having a moment with Yugi, and the next thing he knew, there was a lot of pain and then nothing," Tia replied. "They asked him about Yugi's cuts, and he said that Yugi did attempt, but he was trying to find out when it happened." "Yug attempted suicide?" Joey's eyes looked curiously guarded. "He promised." Shaking his head, he added, "He has tried before when he was bullied." "Perhaps we should ask Yami about it when he returns," Tia said softly, looking down at her watch. "I better go. I have dance class soon." She tapped Joey's shoulder before dragging Tristan, who started protesting before seeing her pointed look with her. "Your turn." It wasn't long until Yami returned to find Joey waiting for him. "I know what you're going to ask." He waited until the nurse left and closed the door behind her before continuing on. "Yugi hasn't broken his promise to you. I just couldn't tell them the truth of what happened." "So what did happen?" Joey asked, taking a seat at Yami's side. Those cuts look too straight for an accident." "Do you remember back to the Ceremonial Dual and how Yugi was pulled in after I went through?" Joey nodded and indicated for Yami to continue. "Well..." Flashback. Just like Heba and myself, Atemu reappeared and gestured to the open door behind Yami. "If you will follow me." Yami helped Yugi up and they followed Atemu through the door to a room that was perfectly half dark and half light. They stared around the room in amazement. On the light side stood the creator of light, Horakati. Oh my god. While on the dark side, Zork, the Dark One, stood. Both watched the three and waited. Before the dawn of time, the world of beasts has existed side by side with the human world, Atemu said softly. "I'm sure Mana told you this already." "She did," Yugi replied, sensing Atemu was unable to speak from shock. "But that doesn't explain now." Over time, the creators of light and dark discovered that they needed those who embody those powers to administer and protect the two worlds. Atemu raised a hand to his heart and smiled. "While I was ruling Egypt, Heba and I were one such pair. He waved his hand, and a series of memories played where Atemu and Heba fought creatures side by side. My beloved Heba, my light half, protected the humans of Egypt, while I protected and controlled the Egypt that existed in the Shadow Realm. We existed like this until the balance was disrupted by a flux of darkness. I still don't understand, Yugi said, partially wondering if Yami was unable to speak due to Atemu's existence. It is their wish for you two to become rulers of Japan. Atemu laughed at Yugi's expression, not in the sense that you're thinking. Yugi, as a hikari, you would keep the shadows balanced and away from the human world, while Yami, as a Yami, Yugi momentarily looked confused at this point, will manage the Shadow Realm. Hikari and Yami, Hokokuri said softly, light and dark. Order and chaos, Zork continued, combined to protect and serve the nature of this world. Do you understand? Yugi glanced at Yami curiously. Seeing understanding and desire shimmering in his eyes, he looked back at Zork and nodded. Then it shall be done, Hokokuri and Zork intoned. Yugi and Yami both yelped as they were picked up and thrown back through the door they walked through. End of flashback. That's when we were thrown back through the spirit door and it shut behind us, Yami said softly. Joey looked shocked. We? We? Joey asked, before noticing the faraway look on Yami's face. He had seen this on Yugi's face before, whenever he spoke to Yami through their mind link. Yami. You're awake, Aibo. How are you feeling? Tired. These bandages are heavy, and the one on my head is covering my eyes. Yugi sounded frustrated. The doctors are in here talking about my condition. They keep saying I won't likely be waking up anytime soon. Yami smothered a laugh at the whine in Yugi's voice. But I'm awake. I just can't open my eyes. I'll send Joey in to you. Yami pulled out of their conversation to look at Joey. Yugi's upset because the doctors are telling each other he won't wake up anytime soon, but he is awake. He widened his eyes and quickly asked Yugi, can you move? My fingers, Yugi replied. Joey can be psychic for once. Yami laughed at the hysterics his hikari had gotten himself into. Yugi paused in his mental laughter as the doctors examined his throat. I don't think we will hear why he tried to kill himself until he starts writing again. Yugi's body went cold in shock. His vocal cords are beyond repair. Yami! Yugi sent panic through the link, causing Yami to almost fall out of his bed as he reached for some water. What is it, little one? He asked, attempting to calm him down. Joey is on his way there. I won't be able to speak anymore. Yami could feel him crying in his mind. They said my vocal cords were damaged. I won't hear my hikari's voice again? Yami thought before responding to Yugi. I will just have to play translator. He attempted to lighten the situation with humor. He could tell his hikari wasn't taking this well. Is Joey there yet? Yugi felt someone brush his hand before touching his face. Yug, I'm here. Yami said you were awake? Yugi moved his fingers, tracing the letters for Joey's name on the bed. I'm glad. Let me get the doctors so they know you're awake. He is, Yami. He needs a ring. Yugi sent Yami a bundle of confused emotions at this statement. I told him about us. He thought you had betrayed him by attempting to commit suicide again. I didn't want him to think that, so I told him everything about us. Nothing yet about that night, since I can't name Bakura or Ryo until he's protected. Oh. Yugi waited until the doctors were done rebandaging his head so he could open his eyes. His vision was hazed with red. Wait a sec, Yami. A board was placed under his right hand with the words yes and no. All he had to do was point at what he wanted to respond with. Can you see clearly? No. Blurred? No. So a clear image. Wrong colors? Yes. Streaks? No. Like a fog then? Yes. Are you in pain? No. Good. The last thing we want is you in pain and not be able to ask for relief. The doctor paused and then asked softly, Do you remember why you tried to kill yourself? Yugi managed his best confused look at the doctor. You have straight cuts on both arms stretching from your wrist to the inside of your elbow. They are far too neat for accidental cuts. He patted the boy's shoulder. Perhaps it is best you don't remember what drove you to that extreme. He gave a nod to Joey before leaving the room. Yugi, Joey began to say before watching Yugi shake his right wrist from side to side. A faint rattle grew louder until a golden bracelet appeared. What the? Yugi traced his fingers on the board. It took Joey a while to understand what Yugi was trying to say. Take a ring. What? Take a ring. You know about Yami and I. This is to protect you against the shadows. They will seek you out now because you have knowledge of us. Joey pulled one of the rings off the bracelet. How do I put it on? Hold it in your palm, then throw it up and catch it again before putting it on. Best do it in the sunlight. Joey walked over to the window and did what Yugi said, nearly dropping it when the ring grew in size to an armband. He glanced over to Yugi, who nodded, before sliding the ring up his arm until it sat comfortably around his bicep. He returned and sat near Yugi once more. He watched in fascination as the bracelet on Yugi's wrist faded from view once again. No one but those with the knowledge will see the ring. It will become warm if I'm in danger. It will guide you to where I am when that happens. I'm glad Yami told me, Joey said, resting a hand on Yugi's shoulder. But he didn't tell me how you got those cuts. He couldn't mention another Yami by name until you had my ring. Otherwise that Yami would be forced to seek you out and kill you. As long as you didn't do it to yourself, Joey said, fingering the band curiously. I don't want to ever see you like that again. And that's it for this one. My chapters are always so disjointed. Some were long, some were short. I think the next two are kind of short, so I'll probably put those two together. But yeah. But I will see you in the next one. And as always, let your imagination grow wild. Bye for now.